All right, today I'm going to show you a different version of a geode here. I have made one in the past, but I was looking and I found this one that has like one that's like this, which I love. I'm not going to do that one today, but I'm going to do a full one today. And I really like how there's some variations in like the darks and the lights, but it's the same color scheme, right? So I think I'm gonna try that and attempt it. Again, these sections are pretty big, some thin ones, but as they go out, maybe a little bit thinner. And then we've got this nice little like dark rock sort of outline. I will make it darker because it'll go with my other one that I've done before. So that is what we're gonna be working on today, is something similar to this. And I'm gonna start with the middle. Well, let's talk about supplies first. Paper, right? I do have watercolor paper. When you work with watercolor paper, you wanna make sure you're working on the side that has a little bit more texture. Then I have two different size paintbrushes. I have one that's a little bit thicker and one that's a little bit thinner. I've got a water cup off to the side. I've got a paper towel because I always feel like I need it to either like soak up some color or some water. And then I've got my watercolors off to the side here. So I am going to start in the middle, but not the very middle. I always feel like I need to leave that because I want it to be super saturated and super dark. And I don't want to start off with that because then I can't make my rings around. So one thing to know is that you need a lot of water when you are doing this. So I am always dipping my brush in my water. And the really great thing about doing geodes is that they don't have to be perfect and they don't have to you don't have to draw anything. I'm just going to start here, and I want mine to be a little bit longer, so I'm not going to do like perfect circles, maybe some oval-y type things, but again, not anything super special, right? So I'm going to do it something like this, and I'm adding some water on, making sure my layer is pretty thick here. Making sure I've got some nice water because I want to make sure that the water does the work for me. Okay, so you sort of want to make sure that the outline of your piece is not super perfect. And I am going to use I think I'm going to use a teal again because that's what I used last time, so it'll go together. Not that you have to use the same color that you have done if you've done this before, but and then just sort of taking it, and it looks like I need a little bit more on my brush, and I always run into the problem where I am splattering everywhere. Like, it's a problem. But the only good thing is, and I'm not really lifting my brush up that harshly, but apparently I'm splattering that water that's on the page around a little bit. So it looks like I need a little bit more water on my brush. Once I put that water on, you can see how the color disperses a little bit better here. And I am going to use a, oh, my blue is out. So my blue is out. I was going to use blue as like my darker color here, but it looks like I'm going to be mixing a sort of purpley blue color. And I'm going to put that on the inside here. And it's a little bit lighter. Probably should have checked my palette before I started, right? That would make sense. It's a little bit lighter, but more like a lavenderish periwinkle color here. But I want to add this in and sort of let it do its thing, add it in some darker areas, and let these two colors blend together. You want some areas where it's a little bit lighter and a little bit darker. Like I want a little bit of darker pigment over on this side, just because. And always remember that watercolor dries a little bit lighter as well. So whatever you see is going to lighten up when it does dry. So just be aware of that. So you may come in, like I just added some darker areas here, and it's not really affecting it too much, but just giving it a little bit more of a depth. All right, so that's gonna be my one. That's gonna be the start of it. I think I'm going to come in here and make another one. And remember let's see here. Actually, I'm going to skip it. So I'm going to try something different with this one. I'm going to make a bigger gap in here, and that is going to be a darker one, and then I'm going to use this one for a light one. Here, I'll show you. So with the last video I did, I left a really thin space in between my sections, and that was what separated it. But I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to make my oval, but sort of more pointier. Making sure it's thick again. And this one might have a little bit less rings because I am not zooming in so much. Like that last painting we worked on, I really zoomed in, and that's why we were able to get a little bit more of the rings in. This time, we're sort of not zooming in. So I'm keeping this really big section here that's not dark. And again, putting a bunch of water down and then coming in with my paintbrush and adding in this pigment. Making sure I add some lighter and some darker spaces again, just like the last one. I actually love that right there, so I'm not gonna mess with that. I almost put some color down on it, but I wanna leave that. I am gonna come in with that purpley blue that I had made before and come in with it in some spots. And again, it doesn't have to be everywhere, but putting it in to blend. I am going to use it for this darker area here once these two dry, and that might mean that I have to come back to it tomorrow or a little bit later to help to let it dry, because if I come in and it's wet, it's just going to all blend together, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we'll see how it goes. I want these to dry just a little bit more. So I'm really liking how this is like blending together here. I like that the purple came in down here, just for something a little bit different. And I do have a bunch of spots on my page, but hopefully we'll clean that up a little bit here. And then I'm actually gonna come in and I'm gonna do another, like same here, skipping and coming in. And this one's gonna be a little, oh, I put it in color. I don't necessarily want that. This one's gonna be a little bit of a thinner one because we're towards our edge. And I think I'm going to add some of my rock tone on this outer one, because then after that we'll be adding in that outside area of that rock that gets a little bit darker on the outside. But as a geode goes towards the outside, it does have this nice rock hue to it, and it just really gives it a really nice depth to it. And I might even come in and add some of it, I probably will, some of it to some in here, because it's nice to have that, just that little extra touch where it looks like it's more natural. And I'm just coming in here and making it a little bit thicker. And it's okay if, like, I know on my edges, like some of this black is gonna go off on my edges once I get there, and that's okay. Not a big deal. But I do wanna make sure that it's thick enough that I can add in some darker areas and in some of that stone color. Sorry, I went to grab my last one because I sort of want it to match a little bit, although I'm using purple for this, but that's okay. I'm using still the base color. So I went to grab that real quick because I wanted to see how much of the teal I added in and how much of that stone. I think it's always good to look like at a reference, whether it's your own paintings or maybe something you found online. It just gives you an idea, and not that you're copying it, but it just gives you an idea of what you could do and maybe some different color combinations. It's always nice to have that in your back pocket. Because I know sometimes, like right now, I was like, oh, what am I gonna do? Okay, so as this is going, I'm gonna mix up some of this like color here. And I will say I probably will not get it to be exactly the same, which isn't a big deal. Actually, sorry for my arm. My palette top here is really messy, so I'm just sort of cleaning it up real quick because not that I can't have other colors in it, but I just really want it to be somewhat clean. So just clean that up, wash my brush off real quick, and then I'm gonna take some brown here, which has a little bit of a like purpley undertone, which will go good with what we've got going on. I'm gonna take a little bit of black here and add it to it, which again, the black has a definitely blue undertone to it as well. And then last time I took a little bit of this color and stuck it in there because I think it gives just a little bit more of a dimension. And I am gonna come in and grab a little bit of white in here. I gotta be careful because it's got purple, and mix it in here. And I see that's a little bit more, like that is not matching what I'm doing. I just sort of looked at it. So again, coming in here and adding some of this brown, more of this brown color, maybe this even, this golden yellow color can come in here. And that's looking better, looking more like what I had before. And like I said, it's not gonna match exactly, but just trying to get it to be similar because this is what we're making is a triptych. So I sort of want these to come together a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the back of this, I'm just gonna go like this and see if it matches. So see if it matches here, that color to that. And it doesn't exactly. I'm gonna add a little bit more white to it, I think. I think it needs to be lightened up a little bit. And then that will help. Again, not gonna be perfect, but as I come in here, I can add some of this. I really wanna add this rock tone to it. And this definitely looks a little bit more rock-like than my other one. My other one was a little bit tanner, and that's okay. But we do want a good amount of this. So I see that some of these areas have dried. So just dipping my brush back in the water to help make sure that I'm getting that nice blended look that I want. I don't want it to look like I put it down on the paper. I want the water, to do it to soak it up. So I'm gonna come in here and put some of this in different areas. And you can see it's already drying, so it's a little hard sometimes to stick it in there because it's already dry, which is not a bad thing either, right? But I like to have little touches of this color throughout to sort of blend everything together. And I almost forgot that I did this. So this little guy, I accidentally flicked something on it, but I am going to take my brush and get off most of the water, and then look, it sucked it right up and you can't even tell it's there, which is awesome. All right, the next thing I'm gonna do is, while this is outside is wet, I am gonna take some black and make a black outline with it. And it's okay if it blends in. I sort of like that it blends in, because then it sort of looks a little bit, again, a little bit more natural. And I will be adding some darker tones into those other areas that we haven't gotten to yet, and that will pull it all together. So it's okay if I'm touching the outside a little bit. I know it looks weird right now, but we'll get it to look good. So I am coming in, like barely touching it. A little bit more water on my black. And it is gonna get a little bit lighter because it is blending in with these greens, this teal color, and that really nice earth tone. So there will be times, like especially over here, I'm looking at it, where I'm gonna have to come back and do another layer of black, at least one more. And that's not a bad thing. It just is what it is. And there will be some areas that are already dry. And again, that's okay too, because it gives it more of that like not perfect look where everything has this black around it. I'm not gonna make it as thick as I did on the last one because we didn't zoom in enough, and I'm actually gonna turn my page here so I don't have to reach across. But be careful when you turn it. You don't want to pick it up because of all the water that we have on the page. You just want to turn it nicely on the table. And like what I was saying before I turned it, I don't want a ton of this black on the outside because I didn't zoom in a lot. So I do want it to be a little bit thicker, but it doesn't have to be like super thick. Like the last time we made it was a couple inches thick. So maybe like 2 paintbrush wide thick, something along those lines. Oh yeah, look at that right there. So I'll have to come back and do that, and that's okay. So what I want to do right now is I am going to go back to the middle, and I'm going to mix this purple with some black actually, and another spot on my paint palette on the top here. I'm going to add a little bit of that teal to it because I want it to have a little bit of that undertone here. And I'm not going to add water here. I'm actually going to add a ton of water on my brush and see. Scratch that. I am going to add water because I want it. I don't want to do the work. I want the water to do the work. So that means, and I'm getting close, but not super close, especially where like, oops, I got too close on that. I wanted to get close, but not super close where the layers are going to blend. So I accidentally got close there, oops, and dropped paint there, but that's okay. Look at me, just making mistakes left and right, but that's okay. It's gonna be okay because that's what's awesome about this. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm gonna come in here, try not to get close, although I did right there again. And it's okay if some of that black is coming through because we want that to be darker. We want this to be a darker layer. And I am going to come in here eventually and add some black to this layer. A little bit of that teal so that it's not like, it's like, what is happening here? We want it to blend. So I'm going to come in with teal and some black. I'm looking at this, and this may not be my favorite one. I may redo this one because it's not something that I'm really liking at the moment, but that doesn't mean that I won't like it later on. It's just not something that's hitting my fancy right now, the way that this is going. But that's okay. It's always okay to come back and make a different version of it or modify it later on after you've taken some time. Sometimes I come back after like a day or two and I'm like, no, I do like this, or yeah, I do not like this, or hey, let's add this to it and see if that changes my feeling on it and what I've done. And you know, and so sometimes it's better to just take a step back. So I am going to come in here and add a little bit of that rock tone like I did everywhere else to blend it in a little bit. And not everywhere, but in certain areas. All right, so this next area is a little bit bigger. Sort of. I thought it was bigger. So we'll see how good that goes. Plus we haven't done the middle. I think adding that really, really dark middle makes a huge difference in pulling everything together, because you've got this really dark outside and then you've got some dark areas, and I haven't even yet come in and added darker areas on any of my layers yet. So I still need to do that with my small brush. So I added water in, again, keeping a little bit of some distance between. I did a little bit better this time by not getting that other layer in. I feel like I need a little bit more pigment on my brush. It's not, or maybe more water on my brush. There, that looks better. So sometimes you gotta sort of figure out, do I need more pigment? Do I need more water? I added both because it looks like I needed a little bit more. Having that water on there is so important for it to sort of do its own thing and spread. And so come in here again with my teal black mixture, making sure I've got a good amount of water on my brush so that it blends. And I don't have to add it everywhere. But adding it in, and then coming in with that sort of earthy tone and adding it in some areas too again. I think it's super important to do that. And it's okay like towards the end here if it gets like dirtier, but I think it really helps pull everything together. So I'm gonna come back to my black. I'm gonna add some, like just, I'm taking black and just sort of taking my brush and dabbing it, getting close to the edge here. Being careful not to make too many splatters, although I did there, but it's okay. And then I'm gonna come back with my teal and add some teal in here. Man, I have a problem. Let me see if I can soak those up a little bit. See if I can get rid of those. So if I'm coming in here with a brush that is cleaner, and there, got those back up a little bit. But I love that black and teal. So that's something I'm gonna repeat as we sort of start to come in and refine our piece here. But I'm gonna come in with my black. I need to come in here on the edges and make it a little bit darker, especially this edge over here, but I think that edge is really gonna have to dry in order for me to get it super dark. And when you go around like some of these really awesome areas, try not to disturb them too much by adding, you know, you want to add your black around to make it dark, but we also don't want to disturb some of the awesomeness that has already happened. So you just have to be careful with that you're not taking something that you like really love and sort of adding other areas. Like I like that that goes out. It's okay that it goes out, and it goes out right there too, and it's got some blending in here, and it's not that big of a deal. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with a dark teal, and I'm going to come in and add some dark in these areas where it doesn't have much. And it doesn't have to be everywhere, but really adding a lot of paint, a lot of water on my brush, you know, to make sure that when I bring it in, it has that organic feel again, and it's not getting it to be where it's looks like I'm like adding on these really black, dark lines. Remember, it's gonna dry lighter because of all the water we have, but like here, I'm gonna add a little bit more water. Even though I want it to stay dark, I've gotta add that water in to make it have that organic feel to it. And sometimes it's good to even like bring it down on the bottom here, and then come back with some water to help it. But it's nice to have these different areas in here that have these dark spots to it to really bring it alive and add more depth to it. And it's going to pull everything all together really, really well. Make sure, one thing is sometimes I tend to like add the dark spots in the same areas on each layer. So just make sure that when you're adding these dark areas on, that you're not adding it in the exact same spot so it looks like a pattern. We still want this to be as organic as possible. And I know I keep saying that, but it's super, super important that we really keep this. And I'm even making some areas really, really a lot darker. Where I've already put that dark in, coming back in. And so it should have water. So what I'm doing now, making spot, if you saw, I made spots all over again. So it should have water already on your page. So what I'm doing now is just really taking it and adding this dark bits to it to really make it stand out. And I'm actually going to come in here with this purple and add some purple and some black to these purpley layers too, because again, they need to have some depth as well. And they sort of got really muddy because they're so small, and that's okay. It's okay that it got that muddy. Like, this is a dark spot over here, so why not enhance that and make it darker, right? So it's okay to keep lighter areas. You want to make sure that you're keeping some lighter areas, but we really need to add in darker areas too, to, like this spot needs a little bit more water. We really need to add those darker areas in to just give that depth. But if we don't have light areas and it's all dark, then that sort of defeats the purpose. So I'm going to take that dark purple that I just had. I'm actually going to add a little bit in here. All right, so just like with this one, when I did this one, I did not like the fact that there were some really big white areas, and I sort of don't like it in here either. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to add, like, I don't know, some really, I'm going to test it out actually, because I want it to be really, really light. See, that's like too dark. And it might just mean that I need more water on my brush. I actually want to add a little bit of teal to it. So I'm going to come in here with a color that's like that, and I am going to come into some of these areas here, making sure I've got water on my brush, and just coming in here, because I'm not a big fan of the white, but you might be, and that's okay. You just have to be careful that you're not pushing it too much, that you're like blending the layers all together, or having it be too dark. Like, I think that's too dark, so I'm coming in here with a clean brush to try to soak up some of that pigment. So don't forget that either. Don't forget that you can take that brush. Oh, I think I cleaned off too much of the... what I was going to say, sorry, I lost my track of thought. Don't forget you can always take that brush and pick up some of that color, some of that water. Thirsty brush has got to be one of my most favorite techniques to use, because it's so stinking helpful. You know, like I had that big spot there, sucked it up. Not that I didn't cover it up, but, you know, I may not have wanted that color there, right? And for some reason, I'm like really messy when it comes to these like geode things. And I think it's because the amount of water that I have on my page, because when you lift up your brush, even though it's not an aggressive lift, it can lift up that like big chunk of water that you have on the page to make sure that everything really blends together. So sometimes it's just the nature of what is happening. I can see that's a little too dark, so I just dabbed my brush off on my paper towel and just sort of coming in. And some of these areas are a little bit too wet, and that's okay, and they can stay white. I just don't like big white rings. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't like the big white rings around. I like the lighter areas. Again, I don't want to make them dark. Oopsies. Well, there goes that. That just blended in because I was touched it a little too much. So like some of those areas I need to let dry and then maybe come back and maybe not, you know, and there might be times where I come back like tomorrow because it's a little too light in some areas, and that's what we do. All right, so right now, actually I'm gonna make that spot. I don't like how that looks right now. So as you go along, you may find areas that you're like, what just happened there? So I am gonna add a little bit of like a darker teal right here, and I'm gonna have a touch of black in here to sort of blend it with that outside. There we go. So just like the last one, you come in and see what works and what doesn't work. And so we've got this one that I did earlier, and then we've got this guy, and we'll see what it looks like when it's dry. But this is one where maybe you do like the whole thing in here instead of just the side of it. Sorry, I'm looking in that purple. It's drying a little too harsh. That's the other thing. You may want to come in and I'm going to come and add a little bit more black in here to make it really dark. But realistically, it's all up to you. What do you like? What do you want to see? What do you want on your page? You know, just making sure we keep it really organic and nice. And I'm just sort of dabbing the page with my brush. I'm a little bit of black paint here coming back in and making it a little bit darker in some areas because I like that look. And I may have to come in again. Like I'm looking in some of these darker teal, darker purple areas, coming in with a little bit of black on my brush and just really lightly across the top, sporadically adding in this black to add that other dimension in here. I'm only doing it where sort of that I already added those dark areas. And again, not making it perfect by any means, but and some areas might be a little too harsh on the edges, so coming in with a little bit of water. But you don't want to do too much because you want it to be dark. So if you add a little bit too much water, then it's going to lighten up, right? So I'm actually going to stop, and because I could work and work and work, but sometimes it's better to stop and then let it rest and see what it looks like and come back. But this is what you would do if you wanted to do a whole geode instead of just zooming in on part of it.